and welcome back to Downtime Activities, and welcome back to our short discussion videos where Will and I pick a topic, RPG slash storytelling related, and talk about it for a little while. Kind of give our thoughts on it, our opinions on it, our ways that we'd like to maybe use or not use it. This particular episode is going to be going over a concept that's really important for running most D&D or RPG games. And is easy to mess up and is something that's hard to strike a balance with. And that is balancing having freedom to explore in an RPG world while still having a big, semi-time sensitive, important, potentially world-threatening plot that the players are trying to stop. This is a problem that I think you run into a lot when running a game, because you really want to, when you're running an RPG, have tons of side quests and tons of weird little one-off wacky adventures, and the freedom for the players to pursue relevant stuff from their backstory, or for them to, go carouse, get drunk, and have that lead to some sort of crazy rabbit hole that they go down. As well as just exploration in general, to see the world that you've probably put quite a bit of effort into fleshing out and giving some real depth to. But at the same time, most D&D or other RPG campaigns really want to have a big bad evil guy. They really want to have at least a plot that is big to whatever the power level of the players are, scope-wise. It's not really a D&D campaign if it doesn't end with you fighting Vecna or, fighting some other giant evil necromancer at the end of it, or you're having to take down the evil tyrant who's trying to conquer the world, or try to kill a god in a lot of campaigns, some evil god or deity-like being that you have to smite down. You want that big bad, that big pressing thing, and you want it to feel threatening, and you want it to feel like the players need to solve it or else there will be bad outcomes. So how do you balance those two? How do you have something that's pressing while still giving time for the players to explore and experience the world?
Well, and this is one of those things that I think a lot of play groups or a lot of DMs probably don't think about and don't think is an issue until you run into a campaign that does it poorly. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, this was like really jarring. It really felt like we were being pushed super heavily to go explore and to get involved in these cool side quests, and we're hearing all these rumors about stuff going on, and at the same time the quest giver's just like, go 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 go, get in there now. And you all of a sudden feel like you just sort of wasted all that extra potential. We first ran into this in a pre-built with Tomb of Annihilation. It's Chult is such a cool place, and they put so much effort into side quests and to just random weird encounters and
Exploration
NPCs.
rules are a big
Yeah,
part of exploring the jungle is a big part of that
and
game.
there's just so much going on, from like pirate bounty hunting where you can like get your own ship, to reclaiming like dwarven strongholds, and like there's all these rumors of treasure, and there's all this stuff going on, as well as the dinosaur racing rules, and like owning dinosaurs and stuff like that. So of course you want to like put in the effort. Like the characters are immediately like, I want me a T-Rex that I can train to fight the arena.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll build this whole persona around it. It'll be sweet. And then the game gives you no time to do it, because the like story that they wrote and the stakes that they have are so pressing and so immediate that you have time for like one expedition to learn how the rules work, uh, as long as it doesn't take too long. And then you have to set out for the actual tomb itself and attempt to solve it. And like um, and then it turns into a meat grinder, and it's just not all that much fun to me anyway. But like, it was super jarring to be presented with this like really rich world, and then be told like you can explore one piece of it, and then you must go. Uh, and that's when we began to realize that like this is something that needs attention. This is something that needs balance. If you're going to, and that's what you want to do as a DM most of the time, right? Is put that attention into the world. Um, then we just realized that like, okay, we need to take a step back and examine how we're planning campaigns. And really that's where the issue is going to be, right? That's where you're going to introduce this problem, if you introduce it at all, is in the setup, in the planning. Um, because you recently realized that you had done this to yourself in a campaign
Hmm.
some time ago, entirely by utilizing an interesting mechanic, which backed you into a corner.
Which campaign specifically are you talking about with that one? If you can give.
Return to Dracos is kind of what
Oh,
we always referred
yeah,
to it.
yes. That was a little bit ago. Yeah, there was a very much like a. I felt that I messed that up, and my issue was using a calendar and being very specific on my dates and having like specific dates where events are going to happen be the issue because I didn't really take into account how much time of travel there's going to be between different expeditions and explorations and stuff in this world, and it meant that things were happening too soon. And I could change that as the DM and just be like, "Oh, it's going to happen a different day now." But it was something that I kind of upfront made like news to the players that these like sort of events are going to happen. I don't remember the
Mhm.
exact, but it's kind of like specific days having specific relevance, and so you kind of know that, and you guys are also kind of aware of the time. So it really just it meant that I kind of fast forwarded to some stuff that I didn't really want to fast forward to. So apart from avoiding using something like that or avoiding using like I think the issue with Cholt, I was a person who ran Cholt for our group, ran Tomb of Annihilation, and it wasn't so much that I was like, oh, I can't wait to get to the meat grinder. Let's force them there.
Right.
Like that campaign is written. Impress upon your players how important it is that they work towards the tomb. They should always be working
Mhm.
towards the tomb, and like it's written in this way to really push them towards that. And it was this huge letdown because I'd read through this book and I saw these cool things, and I was like, man, we only got to experience like 2 of the 10 things I was excited for them to have a chance to run into. And this entire like the kind of way that that one works is there's this person who's basically dying until you get there and stop them from dying. They have some sort of thing going on with them, and that the answer to that thing is in the tomb, and you need to go there to save them. And so it's literally life and death. Like this person who's hired you to go to Cholt, it is literally life and death for them, and it's fairly arbitrary what's happening to them and how quickly it's going to happen to them. But they want you to impress upon your players that's like it's happening. You guys got to move quick,
Mhm.
and that's too much. That's like too far on the one side of like having a time sensitive matter for a majority of games, I think, because you want that time to explore. So, what are some ways that you think as a DM you can strike up that balance? What are ways to avoid pitfalls?
Well, obviously, things can happen without the player characters being there, right? Um, if the player characters decide to like miss a big party or something, events can transpire at that party that like things are happening in the world whether the players are there or not. And it should kind of feel that way. It's what makes a world feel alive. But for really big story important moments that the characters have to be there for and have to witness, nothing happens until the player characters walk in the door, until they trigger that cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, some things just have to be that way. It's sort of a storytelling allowance, but like that's the way it has to be for any of this really to work. Um, and it's totally fine with to impress upon your players that something is important and they need to be like working towards a solution for it. Um, but at the same time, it can't feel like, oh, if we don't get, all of this world's problems solved by tomorrow, the world ends and that's it. The player characters always show up at the last second and always get there right as right before the villain is able to accomplish whatever they're trying. That way, you get some of the drama and you get some of the like um, excitement without like having to force the players away from doing other side quests and stuff. The other two kind of big things you can do um, are to either build a world where the plot isn't pressing. Um, for example, like I've done a video on the channel about stealing the setup to Ghost Recon Wildlands
Mm-hmm.
uh, as a campaign structure because the way it's structured as an open world video game is really pretty cool. Like when you load in, at the end of like the first or second mission, it tells you like, okay, here are all the provinces, here are all the bosses, here are all of their lieutenants, here are all of the the things that each province does, whether it's a security province um, or like
Production or
production or smuggling, um, and just tells you to go about it all in whatever order you want. And once you've dealt with enough of the security sector, then you can draw out the security underboss and kill him. Um, and the entire game is structured that way. That's a great way to run a D&D campaign. You've got this massive evil empire. He's got his four lieutenants that are each in charge of something different. His spy master, his like head priest, his general, and like
his wizard, his
and his
wizard and
wizard,
stuff.
exactly. And and then you can build provinces and cities around each of those kind of underbosses, and just give the players a huge roadmap to reaching the end of the game. And then it's like it feels pressing because they want to save the world, right? They want to defeat the evil tyrant, but it lets them go at their own pace, and they're the ones deciding how quickly that drives forward. So if they take a week off to go deal with this goofy side quest, it's fine. It's not like the world gets destroyed in that week that they're doing it. But it requires you to structure literally your whole story a specific way. Um, the other thing you can do, which I think a lot of DMs default to, and it's really a pretty good way of running things, is hitting certain story points where it's like, okay, we've accomplished something. Now we need to wait for a piece of information, or we need to wait for this guy to get back to us, or something like that. And then it's the way Hogwarts Legacy runs its whole like system. It's like everything you accomplish, they're like, we need to think about this. We'll let you know. Do we need your help again? And then like the game just waits for you to be high enough level or to have completed certain other quests before it's like,
You got a letter.
hey, we figured something out. Come talk to us. It's like, and that's a super easy way to run campaigns. That way it feels like it's pressing, but it gives the player character space to explore and to go off and do other things. And then you just introduce the next piece of the story when they seem ready for it, or when it seems like they've, burned through all their spendable cash, and they're waking up, for the 10th time with a hangover, after pawning off all the furniture in the guild hall. It's like, okay, now we'll introduce the next story bit so these guys can get back on track. Right.
And the thing that's really nice about that is it keeps that feeling that it's pressing. Like you feel like action is being made towards accomplishing the goal. It's just not your characters actively doing it. It's the wizard who hired you who's having to do some research before you're ready to go to the next step. There's something along those lines that kind of makes it feel like there's still forward momentum on the main quest line, while you're able to go and do other stuff. I think,
and if player characters, in the midst of that, decide to go talk to that NPC, it's easy to give them little updates about how things are going, of like what they've discovered so far, or so like that. And it's a good way to gauge whether or not the players are like really hankering to chase down that chunk of the story.
Yeah, and I think that it's also useful to remember that like you can keep timelines fairly vague, and you can communicate a lot through NPCs and through interactions that the players have, where if you want a problem to seem less pressing, that's related to the main quest line, you can do things to impress that upon the players.
Right.
I think a dog has appeared, or a ghost, one or the other. It's a dog.
Yep.
That's adorable. But yeah, you can totally like have sort of things in the world that show to the players that the thing they're working towards solving is not currently a pressing issue. For instance, if the tyrant army is what you're afraid of, like there's a tyrant army that's marching on the city or something, you can express the player, like you can have it be winter. You can say that winter's here, and you can have people say like, think the gods winter's here, and I hear it's going to be a harsh one. Well, at least have a couple of months before their army is able to march through the pass.
Right.
And that's that little throwaway, random dialogue of NPC walking on the street.
Exactly.
Oh, thank goodness it's going to be a harsh winter this year. That they can overhear that express it to them. Oh, we've got a couple months before this problem arrives. We can prepare for it as well as do other stuff in that time.
Or even just there's rumors going around that army's waiting for something. Nobody really knows what it is. Nobody knows why they haven't marched through the past yet. It's been an unseasonably warm winter. For once, they could actually march through the winter and cross the pass, but they haven't yet, and nobody's quite sure why. And you don't even really ever have to explain what it was they were waiting for.
Hmm.
When the time comes that they do decide to march.
Yeah, I think loose timelines and just expressing in some way to your players in as organic of a way as possible is a really good way to avoid
Mhm.
that feeling that they have to go and do the thing right now. I think another really important piece is to you can also tie in the two together, meaning that like I think that this is a good example recently that you can see on our channel, which is with the Skygate campaign. You guys have a kind of main quest or a big problem that you know you need to solve, but you don't really know how to get to the place to solve it. You don't really know exactly what's going on with it. And the
We
way
don't know what
you
level we should be when we
yeah,
get there,
yeah.
or
But
yeah, just
in even
anything.
just information wise, you guys have kind of started exploring, but the area you're exploring is also an area that's starting to unravel a path to get there. You know, you can kind
Mhm.
of naturally through exploration happen upon information, so long as the players don't feel like oh god, we have to be actively hunting this information right now, things are happening right now. As long as you can impress in some way that that's not the case, you can have exploration be tied into the information gathering. It's like you know that somewhere in this wide swath of jungle there's an ancient temple and it holds the relic that's the key to the passageway you need to get to this other plane that this big evil is on. And it's like, oh, we need to explore the jungle and we need to look for rumors. While they're doing that, they'll happen upon other stuff, and there will be other exploration and other kind of side quests, naturally occurring shenanigans that the players can get into.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's important to remember, and this was a thought I had recently, kind of mulling over this concept, that like a lot of D&D villains are far more long-lived than player characters are. Um, I mean, even in many cases, if player characters choose to play elves,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of times the forces you're dealing with, be they dragon or lich or whatever else,
Or eldritch
um,
horror.
has been around for a long time, or is, at least planning on being around for a lot longer. It's entirely reasonable that their plans might be kind of slow burn ones because they have a different perspective on time than us squishy, short-lived mortals
Mm-hmm.
do. Um, it's it's very likely that like what feels pressing to us is for them is, or even what feels pressing to them is still takes over 100 years to accomplish. Um, and that gives player characters the time to sort of step in and stop it, because it's like this was it's like all we're doing is saving the world of 100 years from now, uh, because that's when this was actually going to like seriously be an issue. But like there are plenty of player characters out there who aren't gonna let those ticking time bombs lie. Uh,
Especially if you have a
Even
very morally good or at least very like problem solving oriented group of
yes,
players, it's kind of a requisite for you to be able to use this strategy. But that's a great strategy because then there's really like your entire lifetime is theoretically like the
mhm.
sooner the better, but you don't have any real pressing need to do it. You can do all sorts of stuff to build up strength and allies.
Well, and if it's always possible too that like if the players kind of know that coming into a game that they can build characters accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could absolutely be part of a knockoff Belmont clan that's been hunting Dracula for you know 400 or 500 years, and they keep killing him, and every time they kill him he comes back around again, a century later. um where it's like your character is just the latest in a long line that has been trying to solve this same problem, like, and that gives that character that backstory buy-in and makes that character immediately kind of a part of the world and a part of the story, which is the best way to get players to pursue your main story,
Yes.
is to get them invested in it or have their backstory just naturally tie their character to it already. But you
Make
can't get away with that with every character.
But if you can make your main story their main story, then they're going to pursue
Mhm.
it, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that that's a really good strategy there. I think that's a really good way to kind of approach this. I think also having the problem be big enough that what is required to solve it is not necessarily um, something so simple as like simple being not a very great word here, as like, if you find this relic, then you have the power to stop this evil. If the thing is, this evil is massive and powerful, for you to be able to stop it, you need allies. You need powerful artifacts. You need
Or you
to
need to
have
solve,
experience. You
or
need.
you need to solve another more personal problem first.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at Baldur's Gate 3, right? Like at least through the first sort of half of the game, the implied story through a lot of it is like, all right, we'll figure out what this absolute thing is, and then we'll kick its ass. But first, we need to deal with either this succession of smaller problems, or we need to deal with this brain slug problem. And we know they're related, but
Mm-hmm.
like, it's like, and that may or may not end up actually being the story of Baldur's Gate 3 of like step A, solve brain slug, step B, kick absolute's ass is like it's like that's not really exactly how it works, but like that's an easy setup to use.
Mm-hmm.
We have to deal with this problem in a small scale. Look at Lord of the Rings. Like, in order to save, in order to save the known world, they have to get Rohan on their side. But in order to do that, like they have to deal with the fact that the king's been corrupted and is being mind controlled. So like you have smaller problems to solve that let you solve bigger problems that eventually lead towards the the big thing itself.
Mm-hmm. And I think with a ton of side quests and random encounters and stuff like that, even if you have a really time sensitive, pressing main story, you can make a majority of side quests tie into it in some small way. Even if it's
Mm.
as simple as, for us to be able to face off against the tyrant's army, we need an army of our own. The most powerful army of good nearby is this kingdom, but they're under siege from this other force. If we can help lift that siege, they're on our side. That's a whole other quest line you go on.
Yeah,
Similarly, it can be something simple as like, we have this army, we need to be able to feed them, and we know that there's a Fey problem in the forest, and that's the path of the most natural baggage train to feed these soldiers. Now we have to go deal with this Fey forest situation, see why there's these Fey attacking these travelers, and that is its own side quest. You can make huge side quests and little side quests too be a thing that's a step to a step to a step that leads back to
right.
your main quest, and then it doesn't, you feel like you're making progress towards the main quest while still getting to experience a broad scope of adventure.
Well, and it's changed, how I want to design heists in future games. Like, especially from the DM's perspective, like it's entirely possible to have, like, if you want a big heist setup in your game, to have an NPC hire the players for a big heist who already has a plan. It's
Mm-hmm.
just one that's like, okay, we need, in order to get a hold of this thing we need for the heist, we're going to need to be a mercenary company so that we get hired for the job of escorting this thing so that we can just swipe it. It's like, but in order to do that, we have to get our name out there and we need the equipment and we need a guild hall. So you guys start working on that. And then once we have the mercenary company like formed, then we'll make a name for ourselves, get a hold of this thing. And that's, one of the six things we need for this heist. Like, like you could set up your entire campaigns that same way, where it's like you have, a whole string of adventures you need to get one piece of what you need for the whole sort of final story. And um it it makes it feel like the players are invested in each step of it. It makes it feel like they had to work for each step of it. And it's going to change their perspective of how they set up that type of thing for themselves in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like this is a big problem we need to solve. How can we chase it back far enough into small problems that we can begin working on? And that's where you can really introduce a lot of those side quests and give the players, all their space to play around and do really weird things like player characters like to do.
Mm-hmm. I think also it'll depend a lot on the group of characters, of course.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have
Always.
some characters, players too, some characters who are very interested in main stories, and some who are
Mm-hmm.
weirdos who want to go do weirdo stuff. And that kind of internal party dynamic you'll have to kind of figure out, and you'll have to kind of apply a lens of that party onto your plan in order to motivate them in the right ways at
Right.
the right times. I think overall, though, I think that we've talked about a lot of good points here. Let's try and break it down into kind of bite-sized bits of advice. So I think being loose with your timeline in
Mhm.
so much as it can make sense in the story, um, and being intentional at most times to make it so things are happening in the world no matter whether your players are there or not, except for the stuff that really matters, and make that be the stuff that's a cutscene that doesn't trigger until they get there. Then you'll have a world
Right.
that feels alive while still the important things happening at the right times for the group. Uh, Doing things like um, tying in side quests in some small way to the main story if the main story is pressing gives you the ability to make it broad and fun and diverse with the sort of things that the players are solving while still making them feel like they're progressing towards their end goal of the
Mhm.
big whatever that they're trying to solve. What are any other sort of like little bite-sized
Um,
bits from this you can think of?
Use NPCs to put a pause on the main story
Mm-hmm.
from time to time to let player characters have their time to pursue their side quests and pursue other um, pressing but not story pressing situations and encounters. And then when they're ready for it, um, or when it just seems right, you can introduce the piece of information they need for the next um, step of the story. Or intentionally design a campaign that doesn't, where the stakes feel high and the stakes feel important, but is being driven entirely by the player's pace. Um, it will work. It'll work great depending on the campaign that you're running. Because it doesn't necessarily require the villain to have won already, but that is sort of the idea is sort of that you're dismantling something that's already there,
Yeah.
rather than um, working to uh, stop something, an active plan.
Dismantling
Uh,
something that's already there or stopping something that's going to still take a long time to complete, one or the
right.
other, with that kind of like long-lived villain or whatever. You can set the pacing to be whatever the players want it to be if you kind of frame a problem in a way that is by its nature already done and needs to be dismantled at whatever pace, or hasn't been done and won't be done for quite a while, but it is still important to stop eventually.
And in many cases, um, the players should arrive at kind of the last moment.
Mm-hmm.
They should show up uh, just in time to stop whatever it is that's going on. It's the same thing as the cutscene type thing. Um, yeah, you had it written down in your journal that he wasn't going to be done with his ritual for another week, but the player showed up early. Like, well, he's doing the ritual now, and um, you need to, the player characters feel like they need to now, like, sort of rush into it and um, stop it before it's too late.
And that'll make for a much better story, and you should always have it be that like the crux moment is when they get there, and that's the big reveal,
Mm-hmm.
the big conflict, whatever. However, this does really make me want, if players like roll really well and are really creative and like cut corners in a way that makes him get there in time, like show up to the necromancer's castle and he's like setting down his first couple candles of his ritual circle. He's like, ah, dang, what? I was supposed to have an
Well,
army of undead by the time you were here.
it's a situation we just ran into in the little Pathfinder 2 game that Kazoo's running for us, where we kick down the door of this minor villain, and he's about to give us some speech about like, I knew heroes would come for me. I just didn't think they would come until after I
Did
attacked.
the evil thing, yeah.
Like I haven't actually done anything yet. Um, and that gives rise to funny moments, but that won't that'll fit plenty of campaigns. It won't fit every campaign,
Yeah,
So
more
it's
often
kind
than
of a
not,
choose your audience and
yeah,
choose your timing type thing.
more
But
often than not, you want the big moment to strike at just the right time and have that high pressure, high energy, intense moment where the players arrive just in the nick of time and they have to really pull together and stop the evil and save the day. And that's what makes you feel like
well,
the hero.
it's well, and it's very much one of those things too. Where like I feel like most D&D campaigns, I think our I think our Baldur's Gate 2 series that's going up on the channel right now is a good example of this as well. It's like player characters a lot of times will just feel like bumbling idiots, and the villain is like a lot of times is this like thoughtful, professional, like truly terrifying evil, and
Mm-hmm.
he's just like, and then these group of people just Mr. Bean their way into ruining his plans. And I've always found that very funny. I love it when stories work out that way. I also love it when it comes around the other way of like where the villain is kind of a bumbling idiot and the player characters are these like actual calculating professionals, because that's when you get moments like that where they like bust into the necromancer's castle because they solved all of his grand puzzles and figured out that if you mark down all these sites on the map, it makes this big ritual circle pointing to his lair.
Mm-hmm.
They figured that out a week before he thought they would, because they're actually smart. And like that could be a lot of fun, and that would be a fun story. But it's kind of the opposite problem, really, of what we're talking about here, I guess.
Yeah. But bring it back to our discussion crux point. Do your best to balance between the two. Both are very important. There are lots of ways you can tie the two together. Just make sure that you are being mindful about it from the start, because that's how you're going to avoid those pitfalls where you've already made it seem like they have to solve the problem right now, and then you're backtracking. And in the worst case scenario, if that is the case that you kind of find yourself in, where they already feel like, oh god, I have to solve this right now, and they're definitely not ready for it, and you want so much more campaign before they go to solve this problem, then use some of these strategies, make a comment from an NPC or some sort of thing that slows up the process show up, so that they have time to explore the world and get more done. And if that really, for whatever reason, cannot be done naturally, it is okay to have an out-of-character conversation with your players and be like, I've expressed this in a way that's, made this seem much more pressing than it is. Please don't, I understand it feels this way, but you guys can take your time a little bit more than you are. Avoid doing that, because it kind of takes away that suspension of disbelief. But if you have to, it's not going to ruin the campaign. You can talk with your players.
Well, and this is all, it's like the same thing as railroading, right? Like that's kind of the heart of this whole issue, is like most player characters, most players don't really like to feel overly constrained. Like some constraint is really good, but players like to have the space to explore. They like to have the space to go off and see what's over the horizon, and get involved in other little weird stories. That's part of the reason we play tabletop RPGs. Baldur's Gate is great. I love that game. Skyrim is great. I love that game. But there's plenty of times where you're just like, man, I just wish I could head off to elsewhere and explore around there. That just seems neat. And your DM may not like it if you're just like, we found a country on the map that looks cool and it's got a good name, so we're heading there. Even though your entire story is
before the evil tyrant's army shows up, this place is about to be a graveyard. We're out of here.
Yeah. The Great North is about to be not so great. We're leaving. Like your DM won't appreciate that, but like making a campaign overly pressing and forcing your players to just pursue it, it's railroading. It's the same thing. It's taking away a lot of player agency in a way that ultimately isn't satisfying.
And if that's the game you really want to run, then run it as a one-shot or a short campaign. Don't run it as a broad, big campaign. Well, you can make a short, confined story that's what a one-shot really is. It's taking the big bad evil, the one thing, the big important thing, and making it the entire thing. And it may just be a couple of sessions, and that can be very fun. But if you're running a long campaign, you want lots of side quests and lots of exploration and that kind of stuff. So make sure it's a part of your game and that it's available to the players without them feeling like they're messing up.
Or if the game is going to be constraining, and that's just the way the setup works, make sure players know that going forward. Make sure players understand that before the campaign starts, and make sure everybody's okay with this is going to be narratively a little bit more constricted of a game. Make characters accordingly, and it'll be a little bit shorter, and once we're through it, we'll go back to doing something weird. I mean, there's at least one campaign coming on the channel that's that way. It's going to be a little bit shorter of a game. It's going to be a little bit more narratively constricted, but everybody understands that and is sort of making characters accordingly, and is, going to go into it with that expectation. And that helps smooth over a lot of these issues anyway. Talk to your players. Turns out if you talk to your players, or talk to your DM, it solves a lot of
Here's the
problems.
I mean, it's
It's really
we're
weird.
really beating a dead horse here, but the advice that I think we've given in just about every video we've ever made is communicate with the people you play this game with. Turns out every relationship you have, be it friendship, romantic, gaming, whatever it is,
Yeah.
communication is what makes it
Mhm.
so that everyone is on the same page and the most positive experience can be had by everyone. So talk with each other, communicate.
It's really crazy how much it works, you
Yeah.
know?
And don't be too proud to communicate with people, and don't be too embarrassed to communicate. Just communicate. Just keep everything as
Mhm.
clear as you can. And
Yeah.
use some of these tips, and maybe you'll be able to have a great bit of exploration around your big bad evil Vecna crushing plot. Hopefully this has been useful. Hopefully there's been some tidbits that you can draw from our rambling to apply to your games and get some use out of it. Hope you found it useful. If there's any other discussions you'd like to hear us have, or any other topics that you just like opinions, advice, or just kind of have some ideas bouncing around on, I'd love to get a comment about whatever sort of discussions you'd like to hear.
Yeah.
And if you enjoyed this, we've got a ton of other stuff on the channel. We've got D&D games coming out that are, our recordings of games. We're playing, Will and I are playing BG3 together and going through a 2-player playthrough of that. We do all sorts of discussions and podcasty conversations and all sorts of stuff related to all these hobbies we love with gaming, tabletop, and otherwise.
Mhm.
And so go check that out. Now go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities.